it gives me an error, and I responded to that by saying that there's a technical issue. It's not in your end. If I can fix it, I'm going to manually calculate the grade. So don't worry about it. I noted that there was one that numerous times I tried to input the grade and it came back with the error, some sort of a Moodle, error message, and it's only happening with one submission. So I'm trying to figure that out. But anyway, everything should be in order, and I thank you for submitting your work. I'm, like I said, I'm not strict with the due dates because I just don't wanna. I don't know, your work situation and your life situation. And my philosophy is that we shouldn't be forced to submit lesser quality work just because it's a due date and we don't have time to do it properly. So I rather have you to spend your time doing the coursework properly. And I appreciate the fact that you are submitting them, early. Well, not early, but I mean, throughout the course and not waiting till the last week, because that would be a lot of grading and it wouldn't be, useful and beneficial for you either, especially with the quizzes. So I appreciate, you a lot on that. Your work is very good quality throughout the class. I'm very, very impressed with your learning and your quality of what you're writing, good writing and everything. So well done. Okay, and thanks, Sarah, for starting the recording. We'll start. We'll talk about safety, health, and risk management. It's obviously, like many of the topics in this class, I think every topic is important, but this topic, I think, carries a special importance, and there's not a lot of discussion in the book about mental health, but personally, that's something that interests me a lot. I used to be a psychotherapist and work in human services, mental health field, as I probably mentioned before. So I pay attention to the mental health, quote unquote, crisis that we are sort of experiencing these days. And so I want to mention a couple of things about that as we go through these slides. But it is something that may come as a surprise to some people that safety and risk management indeed is human resources job. And there are some laws, Occupational Safety and Hazards Act, OSHA, is a big part of that law. And, certain organization has to be OSHA approved. And of course, not all organizations fall under that category, and some organizations don't have a lot of hazards. But then, other organizations do have a lot of hazards. And so we look into what causes accidents. There are many categories that, are particularly unfortunate in today's world. For example, there are mass shootings that happen in the United States so frequently. There was one in last week and again in Texas, and in school campus, and they happen, hundreds of them every year, and that's become something that now organizations have to do risk management, policies and procedures for active shooter incidences and those types of things, and they are they're very, very unfortunate. And at least from where I'm from in Finland, I think that there's probably one in the history of modern history of Finland that there was one random shooting, somebody with the shotgun in the roof of a building or something. But in United States, hundreds every single year. Of course, United States is a significantly larger country than Finland, but still, it is something that we have become increasingly aware of, and it impacts workplace, unfortunately, because many of these mass shootings occur in some sort of workplace scenario, unfortunately, and they involve work situations where disgruntled employee comes back and does something crazy. And I say crazy because mentally healthy people don't do stuff like that. So obviously there's a mental health aspect to that. They are put to the extreme, and I don't mean crazy in a disrespectful way. It's just a um, joking language, but I mean obviously it's horrible when people are pushed to that level of mental crisis that they feel hear voices in their head or whatever the situation is, that they are make decisions like that. That's terrible. And there's obviously just because they are mentally ill doesn't justify it, but it does explain it. And as a society, we need to do a better job to take care of mentally ill so that those kinds of things wouldn't happen. So we'll talk about workplace hazards and how, of course, employee engagement, which we talked about before, can help with workplace safety and prerequisites for security plan and those sorts of things. So why is safety important? Like I said, 5,190 employees, and I have to look at actually hold on a second here, because I every time when there is statistic like that, I'm curious of like what year it was. Well, this doesn't tell me. I have to dig deeper to find probably 2019, 2018, 2019 data, because the slides are 2020 copyright. So I would assume that it's there about. It's interesting because they probably have been in increase. After pandemic, many cities in the United States, their crime rates have increased significantly, and workplace issues may have increased with that as well. But 5,190 U.S. workers died at work, and again, I'm certain that many of these themes and topics they apply worldwide in some aspects, at least with mental health. I mean, when I've written articles, about mental health, and if anybody wants to take a look at it, there's website called drwahlstrom.com, and it's just one word, Dr. Wahlstrom, obviously .com, and I have probably 50 or 60 short articles that I've written there, and I just wrote an article about preventive mental health care in organizations. I'm working with a British company called Psynergy, to implement a system for organizations that they can test and provide some proactive resources for employees to help with their mental health. So 5,190 workers. So that's not a big number when you are thinking about how many people they are at work. So obviously, if you think of 200 million people working, and in the United States, probably, they or maybe a little bit less. 5,000 of those is not a big number. 2.9 million occupational injuries and illnesses. And so, but we don't want, it's not, relatively speaking, a big number. When you think about it, it's actually pretty amazing that it's that low. But obviously, 5,190 people dying is a very sad situation, and nothing to ignore. Obviously, we don't want any deaths in a workplace. Most of those deaths occur because people fall from scaffolding, some sort of ladders or some sort of scaffolding when they are, construction sites or whatever. So most of that happens that way. But an unfortunate thing that is not publicized a lot is that homicide is a very large cause of death in a workplace. It's one of the leading causes of death is homicide, and also suicide. People committing suicide at work. So both homicide and suicide are big percentage of that number, which is often surprising to people. I way back in the beginning of my academic career in 1997, I had a consulting company in Pueblo, Colorado, called Omni Management Group, and there was an incident in Greeley, Colorado, where I think 4 or 5 people got killed, in a workplace homicide scenario, kind of, I guess, would not considered mass shooting at that scale, but multiple people got shot because this disgruntled employee who was fired, came back and, didn't go well. And they interviewed me in primetime news, about that. And I kind of specialized on that a little bit in my consulting work. So I found out how many incidences like that do happen indeed. It's just they don't want to publish them because they are, afraid of copycats. And also these organizations certainly want to keep it confidential because that reflects negatively on them. So, just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean they don't happen. But that's really, really unfortunate. So 2.9 million occupational injuries, that's certainly something that we can bring that number down by proactive types of things. And there are things again that people don't talk about, how chronic stress is can be an illness. Depression and anxiety are really, really big, world's most widespread illnesses. Statistically speaking, the numbers are very, very significant. 25% of Americans, are suffering some sort of mood disorder. 25% is very significant of adult population. 22% of for college students are suffering from depression or anxiety. I mean, that's a very high percentage when you think about it. So these numbers, do not only mean that they are physical illnesses. They also, we have to really look at psychological illnesses and remember that almost everything is psychosomatic. In other words, the root cause of many illnesses is actually, although there are physical manifestations and physical symptoms, the root cause of that is actually mental, psychological. Stress causes ulcers, it causes diverticulitis, it causes all kinds of heart issues, high blood pressure, escalated heart rate, just numerous, chronic headaches, eye issues, skin issues. I mean, all kinds of, skin is the biggest organ in your body. So many of these illnesses that we call physical, they are psychosomatic. There's actually a psychological reason for them that started that illness. So again, I'm emphasizing the mental side of it because most textbooks don't really mention that as much, but there is definitely that cause out there. So, does safety boost profits? I mean, obviously, when you think about it, if we are able to drop, injury claims. So one study found that 9.4% drop in injury claim, caused 26% average saving on workers' compensation costs. And so obviously there is a connection there, how much we are saving by reducing the claims, but also just lost productivity. When people are sick, whether it's whatever, even flu, cold, I mean, when we are stressed out, we are more vulnerable. So when we are sick because of medical conditions, there are obviously medical expenses, worker compensation, but most importantly, lost productivity. That person is not working on that day, and so you are losing that productivity. So obviously, companies have all the reasons from human resource management perspective to try to I'm going the wrong direction, trying to change this, to improve the conditions so that we wouldn't have that much. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, obviously, top management has a humongous part of this. It's the management attitude. If the management attitude is relaxed and loose, about safety, then of course accidents, are going to happen. And this is where management by walking through is really important. When as a manager, we talked about that last time. That's a particular employee relations technique by management by walking around. When you are going and visiting employees in their offices, talk to them about their families and socialize with them a little bit and let them know that you care. Well, while you are doing that, you also want to make sure that you are doing walkthrough of the workplace to check for anything hazardous. And you should train all of the employees, and that's where engagement comes into picture. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But if you train everybody else to care in the same way, and people look around, and if they notice something, they should immediately be engaged with the workplace enough to care about it and to alert somebody that there may be a spill of water somewhere, or some electric cord hanging, or whatever it is, and that should be taken care of right away. But if management doesn't care about it, then employees don't care about it, and then people work around in a hazardous work environment. So if anybody has any examples or stories to tell, please share of companies that did good with this, or companies that you maybe have been a part of that they did not do good. It's we were talking about military with some friends a couple of days ago, and U.S. military does particularly good job in a military bases. Of course, that's their job to keep safety, and there's all kinds of exercises and all kinds of security drills and safety drills in these bases, to the point that it's almost daily, occurrence of some type of practice drill, and so there could be a lot of lessons that private corporations could learn from military. Obviously, airplanes, airline industry, it's very important for them to do a safety check, because you don't want to take any chances. Hospitals, there are stories about it. Mohammed, go ahead.
Yeah, I have something to share here. Good morning, everyone. So there is one safety rule in the organization I work for, which is you see something, say something.
Yes.
So, and this to encourage the associates to escalate any safety observations right away.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, we have a software or an app called Dragonfly. So Dragonfly is an app installed in every device in the station. So the associates can use their devices or mobile phones to report any safety escalations, and this escalation will go directly to their manager, and they have to respond within like 24 hours. Uh, so of course, this is not for the life-threatening like safety observations.
Mm-hmm.
They are encouraged at any point to stop the conveyors. There is like emergency stops all around the conveyors. So the associates are always encouraged to stop the conveyors if they think there is like safety hazard.
Yeah. Yeah, then thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I like that software idea, and early alert, because you have to make it easy, right? For people to be able to know exactly where they can um, do an early alert, where they can notify, the leadership and whoever needs to be notified if they see something. If you make it too complicated, then you require people to go through the hoops to report something, then of course they don't, especially if it involves like a filling up a complicated form by hand. So people don't like to fill up forms, and so if you make it difficult for people to be um, whistleblower. It's not really whistleblowing, because it's not like you are saying that somebody has done anything wrong. It's just you see something that could be hazardous or dangerous, and so you let people know. So yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing. That sounds like your company is doing pretty good job at it. Would you say so? So yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's sometimes universities. I guess I can only talk about my field, higher education, that I've been in pretty much my all life. Of course, when I worked in hospital scenarios, there are all kinds of hazards in hospitals, and I worked in mental health hospitals, and so when you close door, severe um, critical care psychiatric facilities, you have to make sure that there's nothing that patients that may be psychotic, that can get their hands on and hurt somebody else with them. You can't let patients to have shoelaces or belts or anything like that because they could hurt themselves with them. So you have to be constantly looking at, making sure that there isn't anything that can be used. And so particularly, like during dining time, you want to make sure that utensils, are counted for, that nobody puts a knife in their pocket or something like that. I mean, I've seen patients swallowing spoons and forks. I mean, this is a particular illness, mental illness, that people swallow objects. And I mean, I've literally seen people in I tried to stop them and they do it so quickly. I've seen, suicides occurring in mental health wards. I've seen people attacking others in a mental health wards. And so things can get very dangerous very, very fast. I personally have been stabbed with the pencil on my chest, by a kid, a teenager who had organic brain damage and developmental disorder. So he, I mean, can't blame him for it. He's, mentally ill and he's in a hospital for a reason. But yeah, he turned around and he stabbed me with the pencil. That same kid threw one of our nurses out of the window. Now the window was one of those, you know, windows like the windshield in a car that breaks into little shatters that doesn't cut you. So it was safety glass, and it was a first floor, in a building, and there was grass on the other side. So she landed safely on a grass through the glass, and other than a couple of minor bruises, the nurse was okay. But I mean, it just happened within like seconds. The kid just, big kid, and through the nurse through that window. And so these things can happen in other mental health sort of, I mean, other hospital, other departments. They are. I've heard situations where, surgeries, people accidentally, surgeons leave, tools inside of people, cleaning racks or, things like that, bandages inside of people when when they do surgery. I mean, accidents happen, and sometimes people get hurt, and so there's have to be precautions, especially for hazardous materials, those kinds of things. And so there are many things to look at. In university campuses, I can tell you that many universities, I don't know, around the world probably, but in United States, there's campuses that are a couple of 100-year-old buildings, and they are beautiful old Victorian, old kind of look like old university buildings. They look nice and prestigious, but they are old buildings, meaning that they have all kinds of different hazards there, and maybe don't have fire extinguishers or things like that. So in organization, they have to do they have to understand what they hazards are all about, and so they should do an audit of everybody, and then daily make sure that they take a look at it. Now, does anybody remember Deepwater Horizon? It's Deepwater Horizon is I live over here in Gulf of Mexico, and I lived over here in the Gulf of Mexico in Tampa actually when it happened. So this was something that in our region of the world became a really serious thing. Obviously, the British Petroleum BP, they did some sloppy things, and as a result of that, there was an accident that leaked enormous amount of oil into Gulf of Mexico. And even 5 years earlier, there was a report that blasted their cost cutting and poor safety strategy, that they did not proactively reduce accidents, and they used unsafe and antiquated materials, so or equipment. So that was they of course ended up paying for it. They ended up needing to pay for all the cleanup and all the damage that they caused to local economy, fishermen and everything like that. But it happens, right? Companies, they are trying to improve profits and they are trying to decrease safety, expenditures, and so, obviously it's not an ethical good thing to do, but this is what happened in this situation. So yeah. Um, how would you do it if you would be a company executive? I mean, how would you make sure that you spend just right amount to make sure that everything is safe? I mean, how would you be proactive? I mean, sometimes you don't know, right? You don't know what's going to break. You don't know what pieces of equipment you need to be upgraded and how often. Um, you listen to experts on that, and some experts can tell you one thing, and other experts can tell you another thing. Um, so does anybody have any experiences of working in companies and and safety issues in that nature where you have to spend a lot of money to make sure that everything works properly? I mean, I'm sure at British Petroleum they wish, after the fact, they wish that they would have made sure that the equipment was in better working order and would not have tried to save money by skimming on those kinds of things. But obviously it's too late now, and they've of course they've recovered mostly from that reputation because they did quite well in taking responsibility and cleaning the mess that they caused. But in some ways, it's permanent damage to nature and people's lives because people who depend on ocean being clean for their livelihood, tourism, when people can come to beach vacations because there's oil in the water, people lose. Everybody who owns restaurants, hotels, businesses, in the coastlines, they lose from that. So entire communities were suffering from it. So the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, is one that U.S. government is trying to make sure that there are safe and healthy working conditions. Um, enforce the act and set standards. So there are certain standards for different industry, and obviously these are a lot of experts who put these regulations together, and they apply to different industries different way. Then there's a extra law, HIPAA laws that also cover safety in hospitals, but also confidentiality and privacy. But there are a lot of legal protections for these, and they require that occupational injuries are documented. All injuries and all illnesses are documented, and so that the government can audit that and they can study these things and understand where it happens and where it doesn't happen. So there is sort of a reporting requirement by OSHA that when a worker is injured, you have to go through a certain flow chart, and this is sort of how the flow chart looks like. So you ask yourself, was it fatal? Did somebody die? If somebody died, you have to report to OSHA within 8 hours. If somebody didn't die, then you ask yourself, was the worker admitted to a hospital? If it's yes, then you have to report within 24 hours. And if the employee didn't end up to hospital, then you go no, and then you ask, was there an amputation? If there was an amputation, you go yes and report within 24 hours. If there was no amputation, then you ask, did somebody lose an eye, and etc. and so forth and so on. So if there was no amputation and no eye lost, or then you do not have to report that. So basically, and of course it's eye is one thing, but I mean, because a lot of hazards cause people losing vision. Hazardous materials got spilled on a face, or so sort of sharp objects fly in the air. So losing an eye is a common type of a injury, but obviously there are different body parts and different things that can so you have to kind of depending on what type of work you are dealing with, you have to kind of adjust this reporting flow chart accordingly. But that's basically, you kind of go step by step and looking at, what kind of permanent damage there is. I do have to say again that people can also get permanent mental damage. and that's much more difficult to detect. But people can, obviously in military, and that's people in the United States get paid to go to military, so it is a professional environment, and people get post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and that has become a big thing. But people can also get PTSD in hospital environment. During the pandemic, conditions were so harsh and difficult in many hospitals, and many hospital workers saw so many people dying from COVID that they have lifelong permanent stress damage, post-traumatic stress, from seeing all of that death occurring in the hospital wards, and something that is so extraordinary and unique that people just they couldn't handle it. So we should not forget again the psychological damages as well. So employers and employees, have certain rights and responsibilities. So obviously, employers they have to ensure that there's a workplace free from recognized hazards. Because somebody could sue them and say there was an obvious hazard, you should have known and taken care of that. So and they can be things like mold in an old building, lack of fire extinguishers. If there's a fire, somebody can say, well, you didn't have proper equipment to stop the fire. uh, you know, and um, just a lot of other things, spills in a floor, oil leaking, electric wiring being, exposed. Just a lot of different examples of different kind of hazards that could be happening, out there. Um, Employers should be familiar with mandatory OSHA standards around, of course, what applies to their industry and their workplace, and they have to continuously demonstrate that they examine workplace conditions. Um, there's just working, sitting situations. I mean, if people in an office environment, it's becoming more and more known now that obviously continuous sitting is unhealthy and bad for you, and people continuously being on a computer causes eye issues and neck issues, carpal tunnel, and a lot of these kinds of things. So now increasingly work has become, stationary in a sitting position, and people are more and more starting to pay attention to the fact that that type of 8 to 12 hours a day just sitting in the same position is harmful. So when we are talking about workplace conditions, we should not only talk about people who do, hard labor. It also applies to, a lot of other kinds of professions, and if somebody has chronic permanent damage from those kinds of things, you may need to compensate people for that. Employees, they have a right to receive safety and health on the job without fear of punishment. So they should not be put in a situation where they are punished for asking for certain health accommodations. Um, and it may be as small as, if there is some leak in a building and there's some mold developing and somebody's developing allergies. I mean, not all mold is, dangerous to health, but if some people are allergic to it, and employer may not feel like it's a big issue, well, it may be for that employee, and so they should not be ridiculed or not taken seriously, if they have those kind of concerns. So that's important. Digital workplace safety. Um, Obviously, when you think about the management systems led to employees' digitized move store, I mean, documents that are dangerous, cybersecurity, all of those things. There is uh, that side of the digital safety, but there's also, as Ahmed was mentioning earlier, I think that there can be digital um, equipment and tools to um, allow people to report these things, and for mobile devices, and so even if there is a certain situation that occurs, that certain safety situation, you can immediately lock in, and it gives you procedures of what to do in that situation, because it's difficult for people always to remember every single step. And so sometimes it's good to have these tools that tell people what to do when when they uh, when they have to, when they have a situation like that. We see what time it is. So we have a few more minutes over here before break. But so what causes accidents? Of course, some accidents happen by chance. Just complete chance. It's beyond management's control. Almost every part of the world and part of the country over here in the United States, there are different kinds of hazards. Over here where I live, we have very serious hurricane hazards. We have tornadoes and hurricanes a lot, and this year has been remarkable because we haven't had one single hurricane hitting even close. But like 2018, 2019, we probably had 4 hurricanes in both of those years. And 2019, I think it was when we had Hurricane Sally, which was a major hurricane that hit us almost exactly. It landed over here probably not more than 100 miles. Well, actually, yeah, probably 100 miles away from us or less. So it was pretty close, and it was almost category 4 hurricane. So it was pretty damaging. And our entire neighborhood got major damages. Roofs were flying out. We had to evacuate. So we left to Birmingham, Alabama, and we came back a couple of weeks later. And luckily, our house was still intact. But I mean, that's a reality over here. And so when things like that happen, workplace is obviously going to have to shut down. Obviously, they're going to send people home, and obviously they're going to have to do whatever they need to do to make sure that their workers are safe. So, but if you know what those kinds of unsafe conditions are, like over here, we try to prepare for them. We know that there's hurricanes, so we have safety schedules, to prepare for certain climates and certain alert systems. How we get employees notified immediately if there's a hazardous condition. How do we back up and secure the data if the electricity, goes out? We have generators, etc. How do we make sure that we have an immediate repair crew out there if, trees fall into our building, so all of those things, if you have conditions like that, again, some places have earthquakes, some places have mudslides, some places have snowstorms that can be, hazardous. So whatever the conditions are, there should be certain plans and, the way to prepare for them. So but of course, if there are some unsafe acts, if people intentionally do something unsafe, then whatever your efforts are for preventing those disasters from happening, will kind of not help you, because people will clearly will just do something to completely wipe away all your preparation. They sabotage something, and if they turn down the alert system, then things can go bad. It's kind of like if you have seen the first Jurassic Park movie. It's a good illustration of how things can happen in these situations. If you remember the movie, they brought the experts into this island that was turned into Jurassic Park theme park, and they wanted to get everybody's experts endorsement, and how they're going to make a lot of money, and people visiting this park that had these genetically created dinosaurs. And then, of course, hurricane hit. And then, of course, there was one guy who committed unsafe act and wanted to steal the DNA, and therefore shut down the security system just exactly in the right time when it was not needed, when the storm was hitting. And then they had schemed some, not, I guess, been proactive enough, and they have not made sure that the flooding water would not flood the electric whatever generator, whatever compound there was, and so that got flooded and that caused further damage. And so the point is that one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing. And so how these things happen is that it's not one single thing that fails. It's many unfortunate incidences that happen at the same time or different order in occur, that you kind of have a this kind of perfect storm. And sometimes the worst kinds of incidences happen exactly that way. Is that it's not just one thing that fails, it's a series of things that just happen to fail in the right order. So trying to reduce those unsafe conditions becomes complicated thing, because you have to look at job hazards analysis in a systems perspective, kind of everything that could go wrong and lead to this other thing going wrong, and kind of look at it that way. So you do this job hazard analysis, operational safety reviews, and you make sure that everybody has personal protective equipment, at hand, if that happens, and people know what to do when things happen. So again, it's specific to a specific, industry, so it's difficult to talk about generically, because every industry have different steps and different things that can be done. Like I said, in university campuses, the active shooter incident have been the most common thing these days. What do you do when there's an active shooter on campus? How do you, what is everybody supposed to do? And second one, of course, is fire. If there's a fire in a building, how do you evacuate people in time? Diversity counts. When you are designing these safe and healthy environments, you should pay attention to vulnerable workers. Young people that may have, for example, if you're in a childcare, there's a childcare in a building. Well, young people may not be able to run as fast or may not know exactly what to do in the same way like adults if they are children. Immigrants. Now, that's a special situation because many of us, I'm a first generation immigrant, and this may sound funny, but there were certain things that I did not understand about United States. So, for example, when I was in San Diego, California, and they had in a road, the words Xing, Xing, and I didn't really understand what that meant. Well, of course, that means crossing, and so there's a sign on a asphalt, that there's a road crossing coming. Well, that could be kind of bad if you don't understand those kinds of things. So many simple things like that, warning signs, alerts, procedures. If you don't understand English well, you can't read those procedures, and it becomes difficult for you to understand exactly what to do. So you have to make sure that you take that into account, that, if there are people with foreign languages or whatever, that's why many good alerts, they are pictures, that show some sort of stick man slipping on the oil, something like that. Those are immediately, you can see that image and you can okay, I understand what they're trying to warn me about. Same thing with road signs and whatever. It's important that they are done in a way that people, all kinds of people are able to see them. Aging people with their vision is bad, you want to make sure that you use big bold letters and bright colors and all of that kind of stuff. And so, whatever it is, you get the point. You want to make sure that you take into account everybody of all diversity in these situations. How do you reduce, unsafe acts? Hard, right? Of course, screening. You want to employee selection and everything. Again, it goes back to job analysis and job descriptions, and how you select employees and screen people. So that you want to make sure that you get you hire the right kind of people, and you eliminate those people who have tendencies for to do unsafe acts. So these active shooter incidences, there's always an investigation after the fact, and they find out that somebody had previous criminal record, somebody had previous mental health problems. Somebody had this and this and this that somebody should have known about, or maybe somebody was, alerted about that, but they didn't take it seriously. And somebody didn't read certain report. There's always a story behind these things, how somebody should have known something. And so we need to make sure that we try to eliminate those somebody should have known something kind of scenarios, and make sure that we do know the risks and we screen people properly. And then we train people, make sure that people know what to do in certain situations so that they don't do unsafe things. Unsafe acts are not necessarily always intentional. They are accidental, when people just don't know what to do and they do dumb things without realizing. And so you train them, and then you put posters, incentives, positive reinforcement. You put all of these things in place to make sure that you reward people or penalize people or whatever it is. You warn people, all of these things to make sure that the right things happen. Positive reinforcement, of course, is better than negative reinforcement. If you want people to take it positively, and safety is something that you want people to take positively, you don't want to use negative reinforcements as much as you want to use positive reinforcement. So these positive reinforcement programs, they provide workers continuing positive feedback, graphical performance reports, supervisory support, to shape the workers' safety-related behavior. So, for example, if you have an employee that is particularly good, does something that promotes safety. Well, you give them an award. You give them a award of the safest employee of the month or of the year or whatever, and you give them a plaque that you put on a wall, so that everybody can see it. So that becomes graphical performance report that or 0 days since the last incident, or some sort of graph that shows this is how we have become safer over time. When people see those kind of things, it encourages people to continue to be safe. So you want to make sure that people know, if you have safety record to brag about, then brag about it and let people know. And so that way, it keeps that in people's mind. So you foster that sort of a culture of safety, and you create a supportive environment where people feel like they are being recognized and appreciated if they bring forth some complaints or some observations. Not so much complaint, but observations if they saw something that could be potentially unsafe. Um, Again, mental health is a consideration here, because we are much better in saying, okay, there is a hazard in terms of a spill of oil or something like that, or maybe ladder broken or something like that, and you're letting your manager know that, hey, this is broken. But we are not as good as noticing psychologically hazardous environments, hostile work environments, or somebody being bullied, or somebody being intimidated, or somebody really being extra stressed out, somebody not having gotten enough sleep. Think about in hospital environment, sometimes doctors and nurses pull double shifts, and they are really, really super tired, and that's when they make accidents. Think about truck drivers. If truck drivers are not mandated to take breaks and sleep, you can have people falling asleep on a road out there. So Muhammad, you said you have caught, go ahead, let me read what you said over here. You said you have caught working safe programs where AA is working safe. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So we have this program in place where the associates who are working safe, recognized by managers, supervisors, or their teammates. And those associates will be recognized, announced in the stand-up meetings,
Yeah.
and they will get some, we call it swag dollars. So some organization gifts with the organization name will be given to those associates. We'll take some pictures, put them on the screen for a week or two, and so on. So and every manager, sorry, is asked to at least submit 2 working safe submissions a week.
Mhm.
So the managers technically will be walking the floor looking for people who are working safe,
Yeah,
recognize them, take some pictures, and give them some organization gifts.
cool. Yeah, that's a good example of these positive reinforcement programs and creating, a culture of safety. It's really good. Yeah, very good. That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that gives us actually a good time for break. We are, it's 11 o'clock over here in my neck of the woods. So whatever time it is in your part of the world, let's take a 15 minutes break and come back like 15 after. All right. And thank you, Mohammed, for that story. Appreciate it. Is everybody back? Whoever is not back, please raise your arm.
I'm back.
Good, thank you. Sammy and Lizzie are always, alert. I appreciate that. Not that the rest of
Sure,
you are
Professor.
not, but you know,
Thank you.
I know how hard it is to stay awake when somebody talking with their bad accent in a computer. It's I've been there, and online lectures are not the most energizing for sure. And it would be nice if we would be able to be face to face in a room, but this is convenient for everybody, so
No,
that's the way
surely.
it works. Go
And
ahead.
I think with technology, like now we are in a phase where technology reached to a point that we can actually do almost using Teams or these tools. And as you know, now companies are forcing people to come back to offices after
Yeah,
that. And here in the New York City, like I live in New York, and in the city actually they are not getting the building taxes as people are not coming. So
right.
organizations are arguing that why should we give tax because employees are not even here. So for that very reason they are like pushing people to come, but it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Like you travel
No, it doesn't.
4
It
hours
doesn't make any sense.
four
I
hours a day just to do the same work you can do from your home office. So
That's right. That's right. It's the commutes have become so ridiculous,
yeah,
especially in the New York City. I mean, if you can't, live right next to your job, which most people can't.
right,
Everybody traveling to Manhattan, public transportation. It's yeah, it takes a long time, and it's always made me wonder. I mean, it's so crazy that the 8 to 5 kind of a thing, or 9 to 5, but really realistically, it's 8 to 5 with the 1 hour lunch break. So you know, why do we all get on highways and public transportation at the same time in the morning? To show up same time at the work, and then during lunchtime we all go same time, at the same restaurants, and then after work we all go same time home, and between those times there's nobody on highways, there's nobody in restaurants. It's I mean, New York City is a little bit different because there's a lot of people no matter what, but
right.
generally speaking, the places are empty at these between hours, and then we all crowd there at the same time. It makes no sense. It absolutely makes no absolute sense at all, but yet this is the way our society is kind of built. And now, and like you pointed out, a very very important factor is that the entire economy is built on based on that. So the buildings, I mean, people pay rent, organizations pay rent for the offices and everything, and so many companies have built their headquarters, and so they pay utilities, electricity, everything on those buildings no matter what. So now they're like, we understand you can do your work from home, but we didn't build all these offices for you to be at home. And then they're going to turn around and say, well, now when you're at home, now you don't need as much money, because you don't need money for a car, because you don't need to come to work with your own car. You don't need money for your, public transportation, because you don't need to come to work anymore. You don't need money for, professional clothing, because, all you need is a polo shirt, to look, decent. And so pretty soon they're going to start arguing that, yeah, you don't need that much money because, you know, need all these extra things. And so there's always an angle, you know, to all of this. And but I do have to say that on the other side too, working from home isn't really all that is cracked out to be either. I think what people did find from the pandemic is that isolation and loneliness are also difficult. I work from home, and I can be honest with you, sometimes it's really lonely. I mean, when I lived in Chicago, in Michigan Avenue, downtown Chicago, when I started getting kind of isolated and lonely, I just kind of got out of my office and I went walk around. But that's when I realized that between those hours, the 4 hours between morning and lunch, and then lunch and people coming home, the city was pretty empty. And so I would be hanging around in almost empty coffee shops. And it was kind of nice. You know, there was some people there and it was kind of a nice environment. Where I live right now, you know, it's suburban and almost rural suburban. So there isn't really anything close by. So I don't want to drive somewhere to a Starbucks, you know, just to, you know, get out. I walk my dogs and, you know, that gets me out the office a little bit. But, you know, it's nice, it's convenient, and I get a lot of work done, that for sure. I don't spend time in commuting or whatever, but I can just tell you that it's not all that great either. I would rather go to an office, but then I don't like to be in a traffic and all of that. So it's not everything is perfect, but there are other set of problems that come from working from home. You know, health and safety factors. Believe me or not, some people they may or may not be able to set up their home office, you know, as comfortably and as conveniently, you know, considering ergonomics that they would maybe in a workplace, or sometimes it could be better. I mean, it depends on what people are able to do, but it comes with its set of problems as well. And there's been I did a meta analysis on a little while ago. In higher education, we've done a lot of studies on online students. You know, the learning and the health factors and everything associated with online learning. And there's been less studies considering online faculty and online staff, because in online universities we work from home, and I have been teaching online for, I mean, at least 15 years, maybe 20 years. And at one point I was a full-time online university professor, and people didn't even know that that kind of profession exists, that somebody, you know, can be a full-time professor teaching online courses only. Interestingly, even if you go apply for a mortgage, people are like, how is it possible for you to live in Florida and be employed by a company in Chicago? I mean, that doesn't make sense. And so you always have to kind of explain where I'm in a different state and I'm working online. And so, oh, okay, now I understand. So, so it's I did a meta-analysis of those kinds of safety factors, and you know, the extra time that people spend on computers, you know, had all kinds of eye issues that you know, professionals doing, you know, are suffering, you know, neck pains, carpal tunnel, you know, all of those things that I mentioned earlier, back pains, and all of those. And so, and partly the factor is that some people, even though they work from home, they don't want to spend the kind of money. Like I would love one of those $500 shares that does like massages and whatever. I'm too cheap to buy a $500 share or $1,000 share. Some of those really nice, you know, office shares. And so, you know, I have a relatively okay ergonomic share, but I don't have one of those fancy ones. And I'm like, wait a minute, if I make my living in sitting in this chair, wouldn't it make sense to invest in that ergonomics? It would, but people don't do it. Realistically, people don't. They don't consider those kinds of things and take care of their health well enough. So yeah, you're right, absolutely right. It's a strange world that we live in, and New York is one of the strangest for sure, because everything is so centralized. You know, and I love the city. I don't get me wrong. I mean, when I lived in New York, I was, you know, I didn't consider Oneonta upstate. You know, to me, but everybody living in New York City, everybody outside of Palisades, it's upstate, right? And Catskills, everybody beyond Catskills, like it's really up in the country. So, but anyway, I would come to the city all the time and I really enjoy it, but I can understand living there is difficult. So, yeah, we talked about how conducting safety and health audits and inspections. Unfortunately, lots of managers look at these and perceive these as being a pain in the neck, and they're not something that people enjoy doing. But at the same time, it's important that they get done, that they are taken seriously, and these issues are that there's a regular reporting cycle and regular inspecting auditing cycle, and that people do that with care. And then it's not an easy thing to get people to worry about it when there's other people to worry about it. Many companies have committees like safety committees, and it's not, typically people's most favorite committee to be in. It seems like it's just boring, but that's not the attitude that people should have, obviously. So employee engagement is really, really the way to do it when you get people involved. So yeah, committees, safety committees are one way of doing that. But I don't know, how do you make it fun? Does anybody have any examples of how do you help people to get interested in these safety issues and get focused? And what would be some examples of how do you encourage employee engagement on these safety things? Omer is typing out there, but anybody else, if you have a idea?
So I think the main thing is that we give them some training on that, and make it compulsory that they have to do this training and know the pros of doing it, and how exactly they should follow the safety protocols, and how they can make themselves safe, as
Yeah.
well as everybody working around them safe. So that kind of
Yes.
training should be compulsory.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, and these are many examples, like, you sometimes see like Japanese companies that they do like break exercises, and everybody stands up and they do some, and, it's hard to get Americans to do that kind of stuff. But even those kinds of scheduled exercise sessions, when you get people to do it, you could schedule something. I'm interested in these mental health issues, right? So like I'm thinking it would be great in a workplace to have a 15-minute meditation session. I know it sounds a little crazy, but people meditating, they give it a 15 minutes time not to think about anything and to focus on not stressing out and just being at the moment. It would have enormous, stress releasing, power, to be able to give people that 15 minutes to just do nothing and just concentrate on themselves. When you have a fire drill, why don't you get a ice cream truck, to be outside in a parking lot, and as part of the fire drill, when people get to the parking lot, in a fire drill, and everybody collects to the parking lot, they follow the procedure. Then you say, "Welcome to the parking lot. Here's some ice cream for you." Like make it a fun kind of a thing like that. I mean, there are ways to like, you have to take it seriously. It's a safety thing, but reward people, give them ice cream, after that. I think that there are ways to get people engaged, to get more interested in it. And there are even humorous kind of positive, fun ways to do training videos and things, that you can make it, just because something is a serious issue doesn't mean that you have to make it really super boring. So I think those are some parts that you can really, get people involved, and um, so that's really, because you can, same thing, kind of like, okay, this is a kind of maybe a strange example because it's not exactly related to safety, but something like plagiarism, academic dishonesty, and you all as students, you understand what I'm saying, copying other people's work and claiming that is your own. You don't necessarily create a culture of academic honesty by constantly reminding people about penalties associated with academic dishonesty. So what we like to do in universities is that we like to talk about the positive side of it. We like to talk about how we can create a culture of academic honesty. And we never even mention the word plagiarism or never even mention the word dishonesty. We are positively reinforcing to people that, look, when we all learn the best way, we all use our own words, we make learning fun, we learn more, and that's really the reason why we are in a school in the first place, is to learn. And if you take shortcuts and you claim somebody else's work as yours, then you are the one suffering. So it really is like, let's all be honest, together, kind of a thing. Same thing with safety. Let's all be safe together. Make it a kind of fun thing. Let's all, do breaks between, and do exercises together, stretch, because I mean, that can, just by, stretching your muscles and having a little break, and having the right kind of a rest breaks or whatever, it vitalizes you and helps you not to make mistakes and errors and not to have damage to your body. um, Creativity, innovation comes that way. That's why Googleplex, they have these sleeping pods, that you can go out there and have a break, and you go to this room where you just sleep. You just take a 15-minute break in this little pod that is no, voice, insulated. And so, I'm a big on these kind of things, that workplace should be made fun. And um, I can tell you that the organization that I worked a year ago was Sports University. And when I joined the Sports University, I thought that it would be a fun place to work. I thought that there would be fun kind of sporty environment there, big TV screens like in a sports bar or something like that. What I found was exactly the opposite. We had a strict dress code to basically wear ties and jackets. Everybody had to be staying in their offices. We monitored the people wouldn't be coming out of offices and socializing. We had art on walls, sports art, but it was like a museum. And so it wasn't anything fun. It was a really old, dusty museum. It was excessively serious. And I was like, this is the exact opposite of what people, when they think about sports, should think about. And so learning in universities, if you make everything boring, looking gray and all overly serious, of course people aren't going to have fun learning. Make it fun, and so working. Why does working have to be boring? Why can't we make workplaces a little bit more, enjoyable? And that's where I think we are going psychologically in workplaces. We are starting to recognize that people don't necessarily need their own offices. We need kind of a more of a large community space with some side offices that people can collectively use. People can work hybrid work schedules where they work from home when they can, and then they come to the office to hang out and have a coffee together and so to kind of collaborate, do work, projects together. And so the best companies are understanding is that the future workplace is a communal space and not just offices where people are closed doors behind their doors. And this idea of an open office, like the cubicle things, that has proven to be a bad idea. People get distracted when they are in the same space with everybody and trying to do their individual work. So we are understanding more about work environment, and we are making it safer. We are kind of learning. Of course, like I said, in some environments, chemicals, there are all kinds of different asbestos in the walls. There are hospitals have all kinds of hazards, everything from X-rays to different kinds of cancer medications that have what I mean. I mean, there's a lot of different hazards in hospitals, and those has to be controlled. A lot of industrial sites have a lot of different chemicals and things that can be very, very dangerous. Construction, obviously, I mean, anything about being a painter and painting all day long in this paint fumes and everything like that. I mean, those are things that, most of us working in office environment cannot even, conceptualize, the dangers involved in that kind of work environment, and how that impacts you and affects you all the time, if you're exposed to that. So that's something that, have to be continue to examine, and we have to understand sometimes the long-term effects of all of that, because sometimes we don't understand how continued exposure to something that seems rather innocent, when it goes, months, years, decades, people are exposed to that same type of a thing, can really damage you. It wouldn't necessarily be, just in itself, what short, exposure, but when you are forced to be, like X-ray technicians in hospitals, it's not that one time that is going to be hazardous. It's when you do that, for your entire career. And so you have to kind of evaluate these things in that way. Now, alcoholism and substance abuse is a serious problem, right? We don't work at our best when we have a hangover. So it's a tricky situation, because it is not just about not drinking while you are working. It's also about when you drank before work and you still have hangover and didn't get REM sleep. And now you are dangerous to your environment, because you are half away asleep and you're hangover. Many of these are easy to test. Some other ones, it's more difficult to test. Pot, marijuana, it's not always easy to test, and also it stays in your body for a long time. So if you smoked pot 10 days ago and somebody tests you today, are you, in any kind of way compromised in your work? Probably not. You're not high anymore after 10 days, but yet, you can get penalized for having that pot in your blood. Now, remember, in many states in the United States, marijuana is legal. Federally not legal yet, but pretty soon will probably be, depending who the next president is. And it's many consider this as harmless, or actually, less harmless in many people's opinion than alcohol. But then again, alcohol is very harmful, but it's universally consumed in most countries. Obviously, there's some countries where alcohol is forbidden, but it's some countries is a big part of the society. Scandinavia, where I'm from, alcohol is part of almost everything. Unfortunately, Scandinavians are heavy drinkers, and they are not just wine sippers, so drink a few beer. They drink hard stuff like vodka, and it's not a great thing. There are a lot of problems associated with that, but it's a societal issue. And when people become alcoholics, they have behavioral problems and they lead to mental health issues. So that's difficult to deal with substance abuse and to recognize that as an illness. And when you recognize it as an illness, you take a rehabilitation approach rather than penalizing approach. So but people can do all kinds of different things, when they and so that's something to think about. I already mentioned this many times, so but let me just emphasize this once again. Stress, burnout, and depression are serious work hazards. Depression, stress and burnout, we all understand. Some people get stressed out more than others. It's not, it's not simple. There's different kinds of stressors. There's different kind of stress, and we have stress at home, and we bring it to workplace. We cannot separate work from personal life, obviously, so it's complicated. And some people get stressed out like it's individual. People have different coping skills, and so it's not same for everybody. Same thing like a point of burnout is not same for everybody. Some people can be almost workaholics and enjoy it, while some people, get burnout very easily. It's not a weakness. Getting stressed out and burnout easily is not a weakness. Depression is not a weakness. Depression is not something to be embarrassed or ashamed about. Depression can hit anybody. It is, again, it's not a mental weakness. It's not about not being tough enough or something like that. Even the toughest people in the world can get depressed. Just think about this for a second. Celebrities, who, movie stars and whatever, some examples of people who have openly talked about depression. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. When you think about The Rock and his movies and wrestling and whatever, would be not somebody that you think of being the image of depression. And he's talked very openly about his depression. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian, the swimmer Michael Phelps, has talked about very openly about his depression and how he almost committed suicide after Rio Olympics. Mike Tyson, the boxer, well, obviously, I mean, he's had some mental problems, alcoholism also, and whatever, and he's talked about his depression. Historical figures like Winston Churchill, like Abraham Lincoln, have been documented to have depression. So the point that I'm making is that we start looking at public figures and famous, successful people. There are lots of people who've, documented and admitted that they're suffering from depression. So we in the workplace have to learn how to accept it as something that is part of being a human and can hit anybody and everybody, and not to, force people who suffer from depression to hide, because people who are depressed, they are very good at hiding it. Sometimes the people who laugh the most, um, you know, in a matter of fact, comedians are some of the most depressed people around, which is interesting. Dentists, for some reason, are a group of people who suffer from a lot of depression. So I just want to emphasize this because in the United States and many parts of the world, mental illnesses, depression is, there's a taboo. People are not allowed to talk about it openly, and people are ashamed and embarrassed if they have these issues. And it's really completely different. Everybody can get depressed, and depression doesn't mean just sadness. It means agitation, anxiety, all different kinds of symptoms come with depression. So focusing on those things in the workplace to try to improve those workplace factors is something we can do, but personality factors we can't control. We need to respect the fact that people have some different personalities, and not all factors work for everybody. Even if we do proactive type of things in the workplace, they don't necessarily help everybody. And there are some true, real human consequences of stress, burnout, and depression. And what I said earlier, suicide and homicide are some of those consequences, because people don't kill themselves or kill somebody else. And by the way, these are topics that most people don't even want to talk about because they're too dark and difficult and scary to talk about. But the reality is that they are real, and so there are real consequences, and people do not go to that extreme without having significant amount of stress and depression and burnout and whatever. So reducing job stress should be everybody's job. And again, like I said, why cannot work be fun? Human resource management professionals should look at, try to make work more light and allow people to socialize, because socialization is one of the reasons why people come to work. So don't force people to sit in their cubicles or sit in their offices quietly just working like robots, because that's not something that humans are capable of doing. So employers have a real big role on this to make sure that the right kind of conditions, exist where people would not, get burned out. And so, yeah, I mean, um, I talked about the computer-related hazards. How we have become so computerized in the workplace that now all work is basically done staring at a computer. And we are just in the beginning, I think, of starting to understand how that also have to be made, big enough screens. Like personally, I think that there's no such thing as is too big computer screen. I mean, I have I don't know, this is probably I don't know, 39 or 40 inch, maybe 42-inch screen that I have behind my laptop here. And, I don't show things completely, entire screen. I have this huge screen and I have multiple windows, smaller windows there, and I can move them around. So, why not, people, it's inexpensive these days. So, people should, ask their employers for larger screens to make it easier for their eyes. They should consider these kinds of things. Um, ergonomic problems, like, you know, there's an OSHA's e-tool for designing computer workstations. I mean, it's really bad for us to be certain it's a height and the position and everything like that. Like, I would want one of those chairs that has like a laptop, that turns in your lap, and you can just kind of almost lay in position. You can kind of, because, when you spend hours and hours and hours on it, that matters. Repetitive motion disorders, if you do the same motion over and over again. So I can tell you personally, I had over here in my chest, like chest rib cage, about a year ago, a little, maybe 2 years ago now. I had really, really severe pains. I mean, like really bad stabbing pains, chronic. Like I couldn't get out of the chair. I couldn't walk. In some days it was so bad, and I was prescribed some pain medication, which is another story. They gave me opioids, and I took them for a short period of time, and I was like, no, this is not good. That doesn't make me feel good at all. And so I understand how people get hooked on those things because they're so addictive. So that's another problem. Addiction to pain medications can be an abuse issue, substance abuse issue, and opioid crisis is real. And so, what I learned, that what caused my chest pain was a syndrome called chest wall pain syndrome, also called costochondritis. There are, different versions of it. And it's basically your nerves getting inflamed from a repetitive movement. It's kind of similar to carpal tunnel that, hurts, and there's carpal tunnel surgeries that people do when the nerves gets pinched, because you're doing, too many wrist movements. Well, I had carpal tunnel, so I moved from a regular mouse to a touchpad. And so when I was using touchpad, my wrist was, like this. And then I was using my finger. But to do it effectively, I had to lift my arm up like this, to do it more comfortably because of the wrist. And so by doing this, this lift up movement and having my right hand kind of elevated a little bit, it put pressure on the chest wall. And a really small little change in ergonomics like that, when it took about maybe a year, it healed my carpal tunnel by pressure on the small muscles on the side, and it pinched nerves in a way that it became, like really incapacitating. So I'm just telling this story to you because we all can probably experience those kinds of things, and many of you maybe have. And older you get, you start having those things more. And when you do the same kind of work day after day after day after day after day, the same kind of movements, you're going to have those kind of problems. And so, that can be bad. I've talked about sitting already. Sitting is the new drug. New cancer. They say sitting is a new cancer. It's really bad for us. And so having lift up, desks, when we are standing, that's good way of helping that. Infectious diseases, obviously, COVID has taught us a lot about that. I mean, it can be, and by the way, COVID is not going to be our first or last pandemic. And many experts think that we are getting more and more vulnerable as a world, and there's going to be more and more those kinds of problems. I would go into details of why. I mean, there are a lot of factors of what contributes to that. But the fact of the matter is that there will be other pandemics. We haven't learned from this one too much. And so we'll have more infectious diseases that, are going to cause problems like that. Workplace smoking. Back in the 70s, 80s, everybody smoked. Right now, it's hard to see a smoking person in the United States anymore, and some other countries. But yet, in some other parts of the world, everybody still smokes. But if people are smoking around you, you get into secondhand smoke, so it's also dangerous. So all of those problems, are real issues. And then they are really difficult stuff to deal with. Because people need to be still to work, and yes, computers are part of our work, but we still haven't integrated them to our lives in a way that would really, now to a certain point, like iPads allow us to move around with the computer in our hand. Mobile phones allow us to access things so we don't have to sit. But many workplaces have not really conceptualized that yet, that there are tools. And like I say, it's something as simple as giving people 2 computer screens or a large screen. Many companies are not there yet. Other companies, it's given. Like I work for companies where 2 screens is like given. Everybody has to have like, you could not do your work with 1 computer screen. It's just like given that you have more space. And so those are kinds of things that are more and more becoming considerations in a workplace. Security is the other side of safety, right? So there are safety risks, but there are also security issues, internal and external security risk. Terrorism, active shooter incidences that are just people going psychotic and disgruntled and doing stuff like that. Those are cybersecurity. How do you protect people against computers? I mean, people can be vulnerable that way. Obviously, infectious diseases. I mean, somebody bringing anthrax to workplace, can poison everybody. There are many of these security risks, and we are exposing ourselves every single day, to the point that teachers in schools and colleges, there's a big argument that whether teachers should be armed. Now, I'm not a big fan of guns, and I would feel very uncomfortable lecturing in the front of a classroom with the pistol in my hand. Not in my hand, obviously, but even in my waist. It just wouldn't feel, that's not what I signed up for. But I mean, to me, even the idea that professors would be expected to do that sounds insane. But at the same time, I mean, it gets to that kind of a safety concern that there are high schools in the United States that have metal detectors, on the door to scan students before they come to school. It's kind of scary. I certainly wasn't raised in that kind of environment, but that's where we are today. We don't let kids out of our sight because of kidnappers or something like that. And some countries are worse than others, obviously. I have a friend who, is from Brazil, and he moved to the United States from Brazil because he was kidnapped. And, he spent a, day in the back of a van, then driving around, and then they returned him. I guess they found that he wasn't much of a use, whatever the situation was, but he got PTSD and he got so scared about it that he decided to move to the United States, which is ironic because United States have some of the most dangerous cities and most violence in the world in some parts of the United States. So that's kind of ironic in itself. But anyway, things like that happen, and they are real issues in a workplace. In our private lives, we are subject to those kind of risks too, but sometimes workplaces where people gather, and we become even more subjects to those. Just think about 9/11. When 9/11 happened, there were many companies, many businesses in the towers, and nobody could ever have imagined that they could be put in risk. Like there was a daycare center, in one of the towers, and nobody would ever have thought that they could. They thought it was great to be able to take their kids to, daycare while they work in the same building, but nobody would ever have thought that that would, become a place where they ended their lives. And so, these things are just real concerns that companies have to, think about very carefully. So obviously, in the class of risk, I mean, what level you are managing those risks and what kind of plans you have in place depends on kind of what class you are in. We were talking about the military situation because I used to live in South Korea, in Seoul. I was working for University of Maryland as a professor, but I was a contractor for U.S. Air Force because I was teaching in military bases, there were soldiers who were taking college courses, and we were all, we had to be, everybody who had military ID had to be, given shots, for certain illnesses, so we were giving injections, certain, against certain viruses or whatever, then we all had to have in our apartments had an evacuation bag, a backpack that had our passport, certain, our, necessary medication, as change of clothing, whatever. In terms of if North Korea would attack South Korea and military would have to act, they would have, Black Hawk helicopters just coming to pick us up from different locations in the city, and we would just grab our backpack and go. And so there was everybody was trained to the procedure that because South Korea and North Korea, they're still in war. I mean, there's no ceasefire. There's just a demilitarized zone between them, and there is, I mean, yes, there's a ceasefire technically, but it's not. They're not. The war never resolved technically. So there is still some military activity between them, although they're not in a outright war anymore. But there's a danger all the time of that, and Seoul is within artillery range of North Korea. So there's constant fear of the fact that it could happen. And so many workplaces, I mean, you think of how many multinational corporations there are in Seoul. High-rise buildings in downtown Seoul has, missiles pointed towards North Korea. So these are real issues. Again, I keep talking about these things, but I want to give you a real, picture of real issues, how, the plans have to be there for internally preventable issues, for different strategy, for different risks, how do you deal with them? Also PR strategy, if something does happen, how do you talk to public about it? How do you communicate it out? How do you, eliminate any public kind of flashback or any kind of difficulties from that? You have to evaluate the external risks, like I said, hurricanes, snowstorms, earthquakes, whatever it is in different parts of the country or world. Violence at work. How do you heighten the security measures when something does happen? How do you improve employee screening? You make sure that you catch those. I mean, that's a tricky thing, because when we hire people, we don't have, access to their medical records. We don't know if they have some violent mental health. Again, when we're talking about depression and anxiety, we should not automatically associate that with people being more violent or dangerous or anything. And that's one of the reasons that there's a taboo about mental health, is that we associate mental health with people being psychotic and dangerous. Are some mentally ill people dangerous? Yes, absolutely. But not all mentally ill people are dangerous at all. In a matter of fact, majority of mentally ill people have no dangerous violence or whatever. So those things don't automatically go together. And we have to be able to look at the both sides. Zero tolerance. If there's employee violence of any kind, we should, terminate those people. I mean, not terminate, like fire them, what I'm saying, terminating, such as you understand. I'm not talking about, complete termination, right? So we should, fire them, if somebody shows any kind of violence in the workplace. Use workplace violence training. When I was working in mental health wards, we had training multiple times a year of how to non-aggressive treatment of aggressive patients. So all kinds of martial arts techniques and things like that. How do you, if somebody throws a punch at you, how do you control that without hurting them as much as possible? So it wasn't how do we, use Krav Maga or something like that, against the patient to, to hurt them. It was how do we manage the situation without hurting them, and also making sure that we don't get hurt in ourselves in the process. So there was training for that all the time. And, guidelines for firing high-risk employee. And when you fire somebody, people get upset. So you want to make sure that, you have a security, present, and you are doing the firing of an employee in a way that you protect everybody around in that situation, because people can get upset and they can get violent when they are told to leave. And violence towards women at work is real. Rapes happen, and they should be talked about. There is sexual violence against women in the workplace. It's not always as extreme as rape. It could be hostile work environment. It can be verbal. It can be physical, slapping, behind or something like that. Those are real problems, and women are real targets of that. And sexual harassment, sexual violence is a real thing in the workplace. And so that has to be considered very carefully. It's that's why I used to be a boxer. So I've always felt relatively comfortable in every situation. I always felt like if somebody is getting aggressive and violent with me, that I do know how to punch them. I know how to, knock them out if needed. Again, I'm not saying that arrogantly because I don't like violence and I don't think boxing as being violent or aggressive. It's just a sport. But the benefit of the sport is that if need be, you know how to defend yourself. Increasingly, women are getting into boxing, and I really support women's boxing and women's martial arts in combat sports, because if somebody does attack you, it's really good to know how to defend yourself. And I encourage women, of getting trained, because it can surprise the rapist when you know how to hit them back. So it's sometimes we have to go to that level to train women how to take care of themselves if we can protect them as a society and as a workplace. So analyze the current risk level, installing mechanical security systems so that you have, you can hit, alert button. If there's, banks have the rubbery buttons under their desks and things like that. Make those things possible fast, and monitor, have cameras when needed. Install natural and architectural security systems, meaning you design spaces in a way that somebody's able to see and people are not in a dark corners and stuff. So there's a lot of architectural design and ergonomics that goes into installing organizational security systems. I mean, all of these things are something to take seriously. Terrorism is a real factor in a society, has been for a long time. And we're just now talking about it more, but it's been an issue. I mean, I remember visiting in Athens, as a young kid, and there was a building, some department store that got blown up by terrorists. So it's not something that just occurred right now, but it's a real threat in a society. Airplanes get hijacked. Those kinds of situations have happened historically. So we have to protect employees and physical assets, in those situations. I mentioned cybersecurity many times. Data security is everybody's responsibility, and those cyber criminals are very clever. There's threats everywhere. Old data is bad data. You have to encrypt all the communications and messaging, and you have to monitor these things all the time. So you got to have IT department capable of doing their job. In every situation, and I know we are almost done over here, a few more minutes. In any situation, you have to plan for your business continuity in these emergency plans. So the first initial reactions would be, take care of your people, make sure that they are protected, and make sure everybody's safe. But you also have to have a plan to continue in the operations. Over here in the Gulf, region, like I said earlier, we have backup generators. We have, ways to make sure that our information is up in the cloud so that we can come home. We can use mobile, tools to continue our operations. So even online universities, they have kickback plans. They have plans where if a natural disaster happens, they can continue operating. So you have to, in everything, think about that. If your business is requires that and is critical that you continue operating, and if your region gets hit by a tornado or something, that you are able to continue your operations. Develop a plan, identify key responsibilities, make sure everybody knows what to do when it happens, and then train employees regularly. And yeah, I mean, that's it. We made it in time. So thank you again. I mean, I get a little passionate about this topic, particularly about the mental health, because like I said, I'm, used to be a mental health professional, and particularly interested in organizational psychology. So I take this very seriously. But I hope that, I raised a little bit of awareness, among you as well of some of these issues. So thank you for listening, and I'll catch up with grading today and tomorrow. I'm gonna go work out after this with my wife. So after that, if I'm still, able to do something, I'll catch up, and tomorrow for sure. But stay tuned. And again, you're all doing great work. Haven't not needed to give any bad grades, or I mean, I don't give grades, you earn grades, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, it has not been a problem in this class at all. So continue the good work, and if there's something that you have not yet submit it, then go ahead and submit as soon as possible, please. Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you again. Let me know if you need anything.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Sami.
Professor. Bye.
Thank you, Chiru.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, everybody.
Professor.
Thank you, Alicia.
Goodbye.
Bye.